Let me tell you something most people will never admit. Your biggest enemy is not the world, not your past, not the people who doubted you. It's the voice inside you that needs to be right, needs to be seen, needs to be admired. That voice is your ego, and it's quietly destroying your chances of winning. Ego makes you emotional when you should be strategic. It makes you loud when you should be observing. It convinces you that protecting your pride matters more than protecting your future. Winners don't react, they respond. They don't seek validation, they seek control. If you truly want to win in life, not look strong, not feel important, but actually win, then you must learn this hard truth. The ego has to die before greatness can live. Your ego is not strength. It's not confidence. It's fear wearing expensive clothes. Real confidence is quiet, controlled, and grounded in skill. Ego, on the other hand, is loud because it's insecure. It needs attention because it doesn't trust itself. When someone criticizes you and your chest tightens, when you feel the urge to interrupt, explain, defend, or attack, that's not confidence rising up. That's fear panicking. And fear makes terrible decisions. Every time you let ego take the wheel, you give control to your weakest emotion. Ego reacts instantly. Confidence pauses. Think about that. Ego wants to prove something right now, in this moment, at any cost. Confidence understands that winning is long-term. Ego will sacrifice relationships, opportunities, and even self-respect just to feel superior for a few seconds. Confidence doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be seen. It knows who it is, so it doesn't panic when it's questioned. If you feel offended easily, it's not because you're strong. It's because something inside you feels threatened. Most people think killing the ego means becoming weak or silent or submissive. That's wrong. Killing the ego means removing the need to be right all the time. It means choosing effectiveness over emotion. It means understanding that your feelings are real, but they are not always useful. Ego tells you, if you don't respond, you lose. Discipline tells you, if you respond emotionally, you lose. Winners understand the difference. Your ego wants comfort. It wants you to stay where you feel important, even if that place is small. It will stop you from learning because learning requires admitting you don't know. It will stop you from listening because listening requires humility. It will stop you from growing because growth requires discomfort. Ego would rather you protect your image than improve your reality. And that's why so many people stay stuck. Not because they're incapable, but because their ego won't let them be a beginner again. Here's the truth most people avoid. The moment you feel the need to prove yourself, you've already given your power away. Powerful people don't chase respect, they earn it quietly. They observe more than they speak. They stay calm when others get emotional. They don't let insults control them or praise define them. Their confidence comes from self-mastery, not external approval. That level of control scares people who live off ego. If you want to win in life, start watching yourself. Watch how fast you get offended. Watch how badly you want the last word. Watch how often you confuse emotion with truth. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken your ego. Every time you choose discipline over pride, you grow stronger. This is not about being nice. This is about being effective. Kill the ego, not because it's ugly, but because it's expensive, and the price is your future. Ego thrives on speed. It pushes you to respond before you think, to speak before you understand, to act before you see the full picture. Control does the opposite. Control slows you down. It gives you space, and in that space, you gain power. Most people think winning is about overpowering others, but real winning is about mastering yourself. The person who can stay calm while others lose control already has the advantage. Not because they're smarter, but because they're disciplined. When someone disrespects you, ego demands immediate action. It tells you that silence is weakness and restraint is defeat. But control understands something ego never will. Not every battle deserves your energy. Some fights are traps designed to pull you down to an emotional level where logic disappears. The strongest move in those moments is not reaction, it's restraint. Control allows you to choose when to engage and when to walk away. Ego makes that choice for you, and it almost always chooses wrong. Pay attention to how ego shows up in your life. It shows up when you feel the need to interrupt, when you want to prove a point even though it doesn't change the outcome, when you argue to protect your pride instead of solving the problem. Ego doesn't care about results. It cares about image. Control cares about results, even if it bruises the ego along the way. That's why people with control go further. They're not wasting energy on emotional reactions that lead nowhere. Control is not suppression. It's awareness. It's recognizing the surge of emotion and deciding not to let it dictate your behavior. Emotion itself is not the enemy. Emotion gives you information. Ego is what distorts that information and turns it into impulsive action. When you feel anger rising, control asks, "What is this telling me?" Ego says, "Attack." One leads to strategy, the other leads to regret. Think about how many opportunities are lost because of ego-driven reactions. A relationship damaged by one sentence that didn't need to be said. A career stalled because someone couldn't accept feedback. A moment ruined because pride refused to bend. Control protects your future by managing the present. It allows you to play the long game while others are stuck reacting to the moment. Winning in life isn't about being emotionless, it's about being intentional. Controlled people still feel deeply, but they don't let feelings hijack their decisions. They understand that composure under pressure is not a personality trait, it's a skill. And like any skill, it's built through practice. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you're training that muscle. Every time you choose silence over ego, you're upgrading your mindset. At the highest level, control becomes intimidating. People don't know how to deal with someone they can't provoke, someone who doesn't rise to insults, someone who doesn't crumble under pressure. That calm is not accidental, it's earned. And once you have it, you stop needing to prove anything. You stop reacting to noise. You move with purpose. That's when you realize the truth. Ego wants to feel powerful, but control actually is power. Needing validation is one of the clearest signs that ego is still in control. The moment you look outside yourself for approval, you hand your power to people who don't have to live with your consequences. Applause feels good, praise feels motivating, but both are unreliable. They disappear the moment you stop performing. If your confidence rises and falls based on how others respond to you, then you're not grounded. You're dependent. And dependence is weakness disguised as motivation. Ego craves to be seen. It wants recognition, likes, compliments, and reassurance that it's doing well. But winners don't build their identity on feedback. They build it on standards. Standards don't clap for you. They don't encourage you. They simply demand that you show up, even when no one is watching. Validation asks, "Do they approve of me?" Discipline asks, "Did I do what needed to be done?" One makes you anxious. The other makes you dangerous in the best way. The problem with chasing validation is that it slowly rewires your decisions. You stop doing what's right and start doing what looks good. You stop taking necessary risks because they might make you look foolish. You avoid being a beginner because beginners don't get applause. Ego would rather you stay average and admired than uncomfortable and growing. That's how people get stuck. Polished on the outside, limited on the inside. When you don't need validation, something powerful happens. You stop explaining yourself. You stop oversharing. You stop defending choices that align with your values. Silence becomes natural because you're no longer trying to convince anyone. That calm unsettles people who are still performing for approval. They mistake your restraint for arrogance or weakness, but it's neither. It's self-trust. And self-trust doesn't need witnesses. Look closely at how often validation controls behavior. How many times have you held back the truth to avoid disapproval? How many times have you said yes when you meant no because you didn't want to disappoint? Ego calls that being liked. Control calls it self-betrayal. Every time you trade authenticity for approval, you weaken your internal authority. Over time, you stop trusting your own judgment because you've trained yourself to outsource it. Strong people don't reject feedback, but they don't chase it either. They listen without needing it to define them. Praise doesn't inflate them. Criticism doesn't collapse them. They take what's useful and discard the rest. That balance only comes when ego is no longer desperate to be validated. You become harder to manipulate because approval is no longer your currency. Here's the reality. If validation disappeared tomorrow, most people wouldn't know who they are. Their motivation would collapse. Their confidence would disappear. That's how you know ego has been running the system. When you kill the ego, your drive no longer depends on being seen. You work when it's quiet. You improve when no one is clapping. You stay disciplined when no one is praising the effort. Winning in life requires a private standard that doesn't negotiate. When you reach that place, validation becomes optional, not necessary. Appreciation is welcome, but not required. And that's freedom. Because the person who doesn't need validation can't be controlled, can't be intimidated, and can't be distracted. They're not performing for approval. They're executing a mission. And that's how real winners are built. Silence is uncomfortable for the ego because silence removes attention. Ego wants noise. It wants words, explanations, reactions, defenses. It wants to be heard immediately because it's afraid that if it doesn't speak now, it will lose relevance. But silence is not absence. It's presence with control. When you stay silent, you're not powerless. You're observing, calculating, deciding. And that terrifies people who rely on emotional reactions to feel strong. Most people talk themselves out of power. They reveal too much, explain too much, react too fast. They think speaking equals strength. In reality, uncontrolled speech is a leak. Every unnecessary word gives information. Every emotional reaction gives leverage. Silence keeps your position protected. It forces others to show their hand while you keep yours close. When ego wants to jump in and defend, silence buys you clarity. Silence also exposes truth. When you stop reacting, people reveal who they really are. Their intentions surface. Their insecurities come out. Their manipulation becomes obvious. Ego wants to interrupt that process because it feels threatened. It wants to regain control by speaking. But control is not about filling the space. It's about holding it. The person who can sit comfortably in silence owns the room without saying a word. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak with purpose. Words should be deliberate, not emotional. When you finally do speak after silence, your words carry weight. People listen because they're not used to hearing from someone who doesn't talk just to talk. Silence builds authority. Noise erodes it. That's why calm people are often underestimated, until it's too late. Ego hates silence because silence forces self-reflection. When there's no noise, no reaction, no argument to hide behind, you're left with yourself. That's where growth happens. That's where accountability lives. Ego would rather distract you with conflict than let you face discomfort internally. Silence shuts down that escape. It forces maturity. In conflict, silence feels risky. Ego whispers that if you don't respond, you'll look weak. But weakness is reacting without control. Strength is choosing the response that serves you, not your emotions. Silence doesn't mean acceptance. It means restraint. It means you're not letting someone else dictate your emotional state. And emotional independence is real power. Think about how many situations escalate because someone couldn't stay quiet. One sentence too many. One emotional response that didn't need to exist. Silence could have ended the problem before it began. Ego prolongs conflict. Silence shortens it. That's why disciplined people don't argue unnecessarily. They don't try to win conversations. They try to win outcomes. Silence also protects your energy. Ego burns energy constantly, trying to prove, explain, defend. Silence conserves it. It allows you to redirect that energy into execution, improvement, and focus. While others are busy reacting, you're building. While others are talking, you're moving. That's how gaps are created, quietly. At the highest level, silence becomes a statement. Not of indifference, but of control. People feel it. They sense that they can't provoke you, rush you, or manipulate you. And once people realize they can't control your reactions, they stop trying. That's when you understand the truth. Silence isn't weakness. It's discipline refined. It's ego removed. And it's one of the sharpest weapons you'll ever carry on your path to winning in life. Discipline is uncomfortable, but it is honest pain. Ego creates damage that lingers, multiplies, and comes back to collect interest. Discipline asks you to do what is necessary now, even when you don't feel like it. Ego tells you to avoid discomfort and protect your pride. One builds you slowly, the other destroys you quietly. Most people don't fail because they lacked talent or opportunity. They fail because ego convinced them that discipline was optional. Ego hates routine. It hates repetition. It hates being told to show up every day and do the boring work without recognition. Discipline doesn't care about motivation or mood. It doesn't negotiate. It understands that consistency beats intensity every time. Ego wants quick wins and emotional highs. Discipline wants results. That's why ego jumps from plan to plan, while discipline commits and stays. One is exciting, the other is effective. The pain of discipline is predictable. You know what it will cost you: time, effort, comfort, convenience. You wake up earlier, you train when you're tired, you study when you'd rather relax. That pain has an end. It leads somewhere. The damage ego creates is unpredictable. One emotional decision can cost you years. One reaction can destroy trust. One moment of pride can close a door you'll never get back. Ego doesn't warn you, it convinces you. Ego makes you skip discipline by justifying excuses. It tells you that you're already good enough, that you don't need feedback, that rules don't apply to you, that rest is deserved before the work is done. Discipline sees through that. Discipline understands that entitlement weakens you. It knows that comfort is earned, not taken. Ego wants rewards without sacrifice. Discipline demands payment up front. Look at how ego damages growth. It refuses correction because correction feels like an attack. It avoids accountability because accountability threatens self-image. Discipline welcomes correction because it values progress over pride. Ego asks, "How do I look?" Discipline asks, "Am I improving?" That difference determines how far you go. Ego protects identity. Discipline builds capability. Ego damage doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like stagnation. Same habits, same mistakes, same excuses. Years pass, but nothing changes. Discipline would have hurt in the beginning, but ego made sure the pain was delayed and multiplied. Discipline would have forced uncomfortable growth early. Ego chose comfort and charged you later with regret. Discipline also builds self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's hard, you strengthen trust with yourself. Ego does the opposite. It breaks promises quietly. It teaches you that your word doesn't matter when it's inconvenient. Over time, that erodes confidence. Not the loud kind, the real kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. When pressure hits, discipline protects you. You don't panic because you've trained. You don't react emotionally because you've rehearsed control. Ego collapses under pressure because it was never prepared. It was pretending. Discipline prepares you for moments when ego would betray you. That's why disciplined people look calm in chaos. They've already paid the price in private. In the end, discipline doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't announce itself. It just works. Ego demands recognition and leaves destruction behind when it doesn't get it. If you must choose pain, choose the pain that strengthens you, not the damage that weakens you. Discipline will hurt your comfort. Ego will hurt your future. One is temporary, the other is permanent. Comfort is seductive because it feels safe, familiar, controllable. Ego loves comfort because comfort keeps you exactly where you are. It tells you that you've done enough, that you deserve ease, that pushing further is unnecessary. Growth doesn't speak that way. Growth disrupts your routine. It challenges your identity. It asks you to walk into spaces where you don't feel confident yet. Ego interprets that discomfort as danger, but it's not danger. It's expansion. Every meaningful change in your life will begin with discomfort. New discipline feels awkward, new standards feel heavy, new levels of responsibility feel overwhelming at first. Ego wants you to turn back the moment it gets uncomfortable, to retreat to what you already know how to do well. But growth doesn't happen in what you already control. It happens where you feel stretched, uncertain, and exposed. That's the cost of becoming more. Ego will lie to you during discomfort. It will tell you something is wrong because it doesn't feel good. It will label growth as stress, challenge as unfair, resistance as a sign you should stop. But discomfort is not a warning sign. It's a signal that you're doing something new. Muscles don't grow without strain. Skills don't develop without failure. Character doesn't form without pressure. Ego wants to escape that process. Growth demands you stay. Most people confuse peace with comfort. Real peace comes from alignment, not ease. Comfort can coexist with stagnation. You can be comfortable and deeply unfulfilled at the same time. Growth disrupts comfort but creates purpose. It gives you a reason to endure discomfort because you understand what it's building. Ego wants immediate relief. Growth is patient. It understands that temporary discomfort creates long-term stability. Notice how ego negotiates when things get hard. It says, take a break, when what you really need is consistency. It says, you've earned rest before the work is finished. It says, you're pushing too much when you're just outside your comfort zone. Growth doesn't negotiate like that. It doesn't rush, but it doesn't retreat either. It stays steady, even when motivation disappears. Discomfort also exposes truth. When things are easy, anyone can look confident. When pressure shows up, ego cracks, excuses surface, blame appears. Growth uses that moment to teach you. It shows you where you're undisciplined, where you avoid accountability, where you still rely on emotion instead of control. Ego avoids these moments because they challenge self-image. Growth welcomes them because they build self-mastery. There is a difference between suffering and discomfort. Ego pretends they are the same, so you'll avoid both. Discomfort has direction. It moves you forward. Suffering is what happens when you refuse discomfort and stay stuck. The irony is that avoiding discomfort often leads to deeper pain, regret, stagnation, self-doubt. Growth hurts up front but heals later. Ego avoids pain now and pays for it later. When you learn to tolerate discomfort, something shifts. You stop panicking when things feel hard. You stop interpreting struggle as failure. You stop needing immediate reassurance. You understand that discomfort is temporary, but the strength it builds is permanent. Ego loses its grip when you realize that comfort is not the goal. Capability is. Winning in life requires you to choose discomfort intentionally, to walk into challenges without drama, to stay consistent when it would be easier to quit, to accept that growth won't always feel good, but it will always be honest. Ego will keep asking you to stay comfortable. Growth will keep asking you to step forward. One protects your feelings, the other builds your future. The need to prove yourself comes from insecurity, not strength. When you feel compelled to show others how capable you are, how smart you are, how important you are, you've already handed them control. Proving is external. Mastery is internal. One is loud and exhausting. The other is quiet and powerful. People who are busy proving don't have time to grow because their energy is spent managing perception instead of building skill. When you try to prove yourself, your focus shifts from progress to performance. You start choosing actions that look impressive rather than actions that are effective. You speak when silence would serve you better. You rush decisions to avoid appearing uncertain. You avoid admitting mistakes because you're protecting an image. Ego tells you that being exposed is dangerous. Mastery understands that pretending costs more than learning. Self-mastery requires honesty, and ego hates honesty. Ego wants you to believe you're better than you are, so you don't have to face what needs work. Mastery demands that you see yourself clearly, your strengths, your weaknesses, your blind spots. That kind of awareness is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. Once you see yourself honestly, you can't hide behind denial. But that discomfort is the price of real control. People who master themselves don't rush to prove anything because they're too busy refining their behavior. They pay attention to how they react under pressure. They study their emotional triggers. They notice when pride takes over and pulls them off course. Instead of defending those moments, they correct them. That's how mastery is built, not through perfection, but through consistent self-correction. Proving yourself is reactive. Mastering yourself is intentional. When someone doubts you, ego wants immediate evidence. It wants to argue, explain, convince. Mastery doesn't move that way. It lets results speak over time. It understands that consistency is louder than confrontation. You don't need to convince people when your actions are aligned and disciplined. Results remove doubt without a single word. The need to prove also makes you vulnerable. Anyone who knows what you're trying to protect can manipulate you. Push the right button, question your ability, challenge your status, and ego reacts. Mastery closes that door. When you no longer need validation, provocation loses its power. You become difficult to control because your behavior isn't driven by other people's opinions. Self-mastery shifts your relationship with failure. Ego avoids failure because failure threatens identity. Mastery uses failure as data. It asks what went wrong, what can be improved, what needs adjustment. There's no drama in that process, no shame, just refinement. That's why people who master themselves improve faster. They're not emotionally attached to being right. The strongest people you'll ever meet don't announce themselves. They don't posture. They don't compete for attention. Their presence is calm, measured, grounded. That confidence doesn't come from proving, it comes from repetition, discipline, and self-trust built over time. They know what they're capable of because they've tested themselves privately. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you free up enormous energy that can be used to train harder, think clearer, plan better, and move with purpose. You stop reacting to doubt and start building ability. You stop performing for approval and start executing for results. Winning in life isn't about showing the world who you are. It's about becoming someone you can rely on under pressure. Master yourself, your emotions, your reactions, your habits, and the need to prove will disappear on its own. When mastery is present, proof is unnecessary. The moment you stop listening, you stop leading, even if your title stays the same. Ego convinces you that once you've reached a certain level, you already know enough. It tells you that listening is for beginners and authority comes from speaking. That's a lie. Authority comes from awareness, and awareness only exists when you're paying attention. The fastest way to lose relevance is to believe you've outgrown learning. Ego listens to respond. Control listens to understand. When ego is in charge, you're not hearing people. You're waiting for your turn to talk. You filter information through pride instead of curiosity. You dismiss ideas that challenge your perspective because they threaten your identity. And without realizing it, you cut yourself off from information that could make you better. Leadership doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes quietly through arrogance. Listening requires humility, and humility makes ego uncomfortable. It forces you to accept that you don't have all the answers, that someone else might see what you missed, that your way is not the only way. Ego interprets that as weakness, but humility is not weakness, it's precision. It allows you to adjust before mistakes become failures. It keeps you sharp instead of stagnant. People who stop listening become predictable. They repeat the same patterns. They make the same mistakes with different faces. They surround themselves with agreement because disagreement feels like disrespect. Over time, honest feedback disappears. People stop speaking up, not because everything is fine, but because it's no longer safe or useful to be honest. That's when leadership becomes isolated, and isolation is dangerous. Listening doesn't mean obeying. It means considering. It means gathering information without emotional resistance. Strong leaders can hear criticism without taking it personally. They separate feedback from identity. Ego can't do that. Ego hears feedback as an attack. Control hears it as data. One reacts defensively. The other evaluates strategically. That difference determines whether you grow or decay. When you listen well, people trust you. Not because you agree with them, but because they feel seen and understood. That trust creates loyalty, honesty, and accountability. When ego dominates, people comply on the surface and disengage underneath. They do the minimum. They stop caring. And no amount of authority can replace genuine influence. Listening also sharpens judgment. You catch problems earlier. You notice patterns others miss. You understand motivations instead of guessing them. Ego prefers assumptions because assumptions protect pride. Listening requires patience. It slows you down. And slowing down feels uncomfortable when ego wants control. But patience is what keeps you from making emotional decisions with long-term consequences. If you want to know whether ego is interfering, pay attention to your reactions. Do you get defensive when challenged? Do you interrupt? Do you dismiss perspectives quickly? Those are not signs of confidence, they're signs of insecurity. Real confidence doesn't fear information, it uses it. It adapts without drama. The strongest leaders remain students. They stay curious. They ask questions even when they could give answers. They understand that leadership is not about dominance. It's about responsibility. Responsibility to see clearly, to adjust when wrong, to evolve when necessary. Ego resists all of that because ego wants to protect image, not improve impact. The moment you stop listening, you freeze yourself in time. The world keeps changing, people keep evolving, and you stay the same. That's not leadership. That's decline. Kill the ego, and listening becomes a strength again. And when you listen deeply, you don't just lead better, you last longer. Emotion is data. Ego is noise. That distinction is critical, yet so few people understand it. Every feeling you experience carries information. It tells you what matters, what's at stake, what your priorities are. Fear signals risk. Anger signals violation. Excitement signals opportunity. But ego takes that data and twists it, overlaying judgment, pride, and insecurity. Suddenly, emotion isn't guiding you. It's controlling you, and you're reacting without clarity. When ego hijacks emotion, you mistake intensity for truth. You feel wronged and assume the world is against you. You feel anxious and assume failure is inevitable. You feel frustrated and assume others are at fault. Emotion itself is neutral. It's raw information about your state, the environment, or a situation. Ego distorts that information into justification for immediate action, blame, or overreaction. Winners learn to separate the two. The challenge is that emotion is immediate, while ego is persistent. Emotion spikes, signals, and fades if you respond intelligently. Ego lingers, demanding validation, recognition, and control. It keeps you replaying arguments in your head, second-guessing decisions, and overanalyzing interactions. Emotion provides insight. Ego creates distraction. If you can learn to use emotion as data, you stop reacting to noise and start acting on intelligence. Most people confuse passion with ego. They think being emotional equals being authentic, when often it's ego taking credit or defending itself. Feeling hurt, frustrated, or defensive doesn't make you weak, but letting that feeling dictate your next move does. Emotion can fuel disciplined action. Ego fuels chaos. One builds results, the other builds regret. One teaches, the other deceives. That difference is the line between stagnation and progress. You can practice separating emotion from ego by observing your reactions in real time. When anger rises, note it as information. Why is this happening? What principle is at stake? What opportunity for action exists? Then pause before responding. The ego wants instant retaliation. Emotion, when processed intelligently, allows strategy. That pause transforms a potentially destructive reaction into a calculated response. The stronger you become, the more natural this separation gets. Ego also thrives on storytelling. It takes emotion and invents narratives that protect self-image or justify inaction. You feel anxiety about a project, and ego tells you, you're not ready, it's too risky. You feel criticism, and ego tells you, they're wrong, they don't understand your worth. Emotion provides a signal. Maybe there's a challenge, maybe there's an opportunity. Ego overlays a story that keeps you reactive and distracted. Winners don't follow the story. They follow the signal. High performers treat emotion as feedback, not instruction. They ask, what does this feeling tell me about my priorities, my boundaries, my next step? They don't act simply because it feels urgent or because someone else provoked a reaction. They respond because they've filtered the raw data from the noise of ego. That's how decisions stay precise, calm, and effective even under extreme pressure. The truth is, emotion is honest. Ego is deceptive. Emotion will always be there, signaling what matters. Ego will always be there, demanding to be right. The difference is in how you respond. If you let ego dominate, you live in reaction, constantly fighting imagined battles, burning energy, and losing ground. If you let emotion guide you without ego interference, you act decisively, learn continuously, and move forward with clarity. Winning begins when you stop listening to the noise and start reading the data. Kill the ego, or it will kill your future. That is not a warning, it is a fact. Every choice you make under the influence of ego carries hidden consequences. Ego convinces you that pride, comfort, and image are more important than results, relationships, and growth. It hides behind confidence and ambition, whispering that you're doing the right thing, even as it erodes opportunities, damages trust, and blocks your progress. If left unchecked, ego quietly ensures that the future you imagine never arrives. Ego makes short-term satisfaction more important than long-term achievement. It tells you to protect your reputation rather than take risks, to defend your position rather than learn, to act to be admired rather than act to be effective. When ego dominates, you make decisions based on how they appear, not on how they serve your goals. One seemingly small choice, a reaction, an excuse, a refusal to listen, can ripple outward, quietly closing doors you may never see again. The tragedy is that most people don't notice until years later when opportunity has passed and regret sets in. Ego resists accountability. It refuses to admit mistakes and punishes anyone who points them out. Growth requires ownership. Mastery requires correction. If ego is in control, learning becomes impossible because every feedback loop is filtered through pride. People who fail repeatedly often blame circumstances, other people, or luck, all of which are distractions ego uses to protect itself. The person who kills their ego, however, sees clearly, absorbs criticism, corrects course, and moves forward faster than anyone else. Fear lives inside the ego. It masquerades as anger, defensiveness, or arrogance, but underneath is insecurity. The fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of being powerless, these are what drive ego-driven choices. Fear leads to hesitation, rash decisions, and avoidance of challenges. When fear dominates your ego, you stop growing. When you remove the ego's grip, fear becomes data. It signals risk and opportunity without dictating action. You act strategically, not reactively. Ego thrives on comparison. It tells you that winning is about being better than others, when in reality, winning is about being better than your past self. Comparison creates jealousy, resentment, and distraction. It makes you reactive to other people's success instead of proactive about your own. The person who kills ego focuses only on progress, on discipline, and on mastery. They measure their success against standards they set, not standards that others impose. Your future is the sum of your choices, and ego quietly influences almost every one of them. It can make you overreact in relationships, underperform in critical moments, ignore opportunities that feel uncomfortable, or chase validation instead of results. Each of these decisions may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they compound, creating a life shaped more by pride and fear than by vision and strategy. Killing the ego is not easy because it feels like losing yourself. It feels like giving up identity, comfort, or pride. But in reality, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You discover clarity, focus, discipline, and resilience. The ego is an obstacle between who you are now and who you could become. The moment you step past it, your future expands. You can make decisions free from fear, act without the need for approval, and pursue growth without distraction. Your future is not determined by talent, luck, or circumstance alone. It is determined by your ability to control your mind, your reactions, and your ego. If ego dominates, your future is limited, delayed, and compromised. If you kill ego, you reclaim control. You make decisions that matter. You act with discipline, clarity, and purpose. You build a future that belongs to you, not one dictated by pride, fear, or illusion. The choice is yours. Kill the ego, or let it kill your future.